somehow it went to mute. That's fine. So now see, so we have actually seen methods, right, yesterday, how we actually called, and how how to create a method with parameters, how to create a method with return type, right, in our first class yesterday on C#. So now what we're gonna do, we're going to actually see how to create a separate class, right, and how to create members, when we say members, which are like variables and methods in separate class, right? So now generally when we talk about methods, right, normally it is we just created static methods in our class, and yes, I mean we thought of creating non-static method, right, like kind of non-static. So first let's create like kind of met1 method 1 open close bracket where I don't have to mention static. Now this is something which will make me a non-static, but non-static method I cannot call. Why? Let's understand. Right? Now first let me create a separate class. Let me just right click on this and say add a class. So right click on my project, right, add, and I have a class. Right, so here I do have a class. Now here let me call it class 1. Click on add. Right, now this is my class 1 I have. Now I've actually selected same namespace because I don't have to go to the across namespace, because we know how to call different classes if they are across namespaces. That's fine, you don't have to worry about it. Now here in this class 1, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a simple variable called public int, let's say amount, right, is equal to some amount, let's say some amount of it, right? And then let's say I am going to actually call a simple method. Let's say public void, let's say print message. This is a simple method I'm going to take, which will console.writeLine of, right, it will say this is class 1. Simple. We created a simple class 1. Now inside that we have amount and print message. Amount is a variable, print message is a method. Now let us see how we can actually call this in my. Now anyways, if you can see main started, anyways we have all. Let's comment all others. So I don't want some, I don't want add, I don't want this, I don't want this. For example, right? So here we are not taking anything. So which means all the methods whatever we have created are anyways are not used. That's fine. So now what I'm going to do, first let's see how can I use, because if you remember, classes are created, right? Classes are mainly meant to be reused, right? The main concept behind creation of classes and all are to reuse them. That's very important, right? So now when we say reuse in the class, which means whatever variables or whatever functionality logics we are writing in a class, right, can be reused, right? And when it can be reused, definitely that's up. And we are actually solving the purpose of getting a class. Fine. So here, let's see how we can actually access. So first step, what we have to do, we should always create an object of this class. Now, if you remember, just do remember something called a human class. Human class itself will not give you any instance, if you remember, right? Human will not give anything directly itself, because this is a classification of, this is just a classification of some, maybe one of the species you are talking about. Unless we create, right? Unless we create an actual human and say, okay, this is a human class, right? We can't actually, get a feel of, okay, eyes, okay, I can see, I can sit, okay, now walk, okay, sit is walking, okay, it means that human can, you're getting it, right? So which means for every class, object is something which is very important, right? Now that's what we are actually going to do here, right? So similarly, whatever you have done, so we have created our class, which is class 1. So now we want to use it. Now how to use it? First step, you have to create an object. Now how to create object? We have a class 1. I'll give some variable to this class 1. Let's say obj is equal to, now as of now this is a variable of class 1. But when I go and use instance, which is new, is a keyword which will instantiate or create a object of the class we are using. Open and close bracket. Now this is called as an object of a class, right? Now we'll actually understand more about why we are actually making class and open and close bracket. Right? Once the methods and these stuffs are done, we'll understand why do we use this. Fine. But new keyword is the one which will create a separate memory instance for class 1, and that's why we normally call this variable obj of class 1 as an object of a class 1. Right? So this is something which is actual class we have. Right? So now once we have created, right, once we have actually created a class object, now it's time to access the members of it. Right? So members, let's obj is my object of class. Now how to access members? If you remember, we have actually understood in our first class, if you want to access any member of a class, first step is to create an object, and through that object, right, I can access members using resolution operator called dot. See, when I press on dot, you can see there is a variable called amount and there is a method called print message. Right? So I can call print message, open and close bracket, and I can print the variable. Let's say control.writeLine of obj dot, my variable is amount. So I want to get the value of the variable. That's it. That's why I'm actually printing. Now this is something which is my class created, object of class created, and I'm actually using my. So let me run this. Let me run this program. Guys, please stop me if you have any questions at any point of time. Right? Because these are basics, and don't hesitate to ask questions here. Right? Before we move on to the advanced concepts, right? So every time we have to be very strong in basics mainly. Fine. Okay, now you can see here main started, and this is the main product method. This is all about your actual main, but here you can see this is class 1. Now this class 1 is nothing but obj.print message. Now this print message is something which is actually a method of your class 1, and this is printed. Fine. So that's a print message which got printed, and the next one is a variable. So we are actually accessing a variable called amount, right? So amount is nothing but your class 1's integer variable, and we are printing that amount over here, right? This is the amount. Now we are actually printing the value of that amount, which is 100k, right? Which means this is how we normally call the members of a class defined in a separate class entity. Right? Sorry, Gopichand, what's the question? Why print message? Which print message you mean? You mean to say this method, you mean? We just created a simple method with the name print message. So don't go with the name. I can actually make it any name I want actually, right? I just gave this name as print message just to give some name. Don't go with this name. Maybe I can give XYZ. Right? Let me just stop it. Don't go with the name. I can just say XYZ is my method name, and similar method name I can call it from here. XYZ. Simple. Right? So now when I run it, right, it will give me the same stuff, right? I just gave the name just to create the message part. That's it, nothing else. Fine. Okay, good. Now this is how we normally create. Now, as we are actually calling the members of a class through an object, right? Those members are called as your object members. Simple, right? An object members, right, can be accessed outside the class only through object, no other way, right? And now let us see. Let's go back to this class. Let me create one more variable called public. Public. Let's say I'm going to create a string called some string. Maybe I'll say data, the string name, and I'll just say hello there. Now, a simple string we created. Okay. And let's say I'm going to create a simple method also, public void. Let's say something called get sample is my method name. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this variable as static and this method also static. Now this is very important, guys. Please do concentrate here. I've created a static variable, right? Also, I've created a static method. Right? Now, let's go back to the program. Now, even the static variable, even if it is static variable and static method, they are still members of a class. Right? Now, when you create any variable or a method static, right? Now, these variables or these methods can be accessed directly through class. That's the beauty here. So here, let's say I'm gonna call, let's say this is static method of class 1, for example. Sorry, right? Get sample here. Now let's see how this variable and this method can be. So now when I just go ahead and see obj dot, you can see here I'm not able to see something called data or get sample methods here. Why? Because there are no more object methods and object variables. They are class. I can directly go to class 1 dot. See, I'm able to see data, right? And also I'm able to see get sample. I can see get sample and I can say console dot write line of my class 1 dot data. Data is my string. Now this static variable and static method, we are able to access it directly using my class name. I don't need an object for this. So when I run this, you can see here, see this is a static method of class 1. We are accessing directly using class 1. And then hello there. So hello there is again a separate variable we have defined, which is a string variable and a static. And static variable we are again calling through class 1. Right? So for these static variables and static methods, right, we don't need to create a object, but we can access directly through class. So that's why these type of members are called as a class members. So that's the difference between a class members and object members. Right? So object members are always non-static, class members are always static. Right? Now, within the same class, let's understand the behavior of static and non-static. See, when you have a static variable, right, you can access the static variable from anywhere you want, which means I can access from non-static method. I can just say hello. See, what is this method? This method is called as a non-static method, right? And I'm able to access my static variable called data here, and also I can access here data is equal to something. Right? Now when I just build this, right, you can see there is no issue here, which means static variables can be accessed from anywhere. And also the static method, which is this get sample is static method, right? I can access from non-static method. See, I can access get sample from my non-static method. So which means when we create anything as static, right, access from anywhere. Okay, so that's your static. Now let's understand how non-static works. Now here this is non-static. Now can I access amount in my non-static methods? See, I can access amount. Yes, I can access amount here. This is a non-static method, new variable. I'm good to use here. Now let us see whether I can use this non-static in a static. Can I see? When I start typing in, you're not getting. If you want, you can actually try this amount is equal to so and so. Now see what error you are getting. See, an object reference is required for non-static field. Non-static members cannot be directly accessed from static. No. Fine. So for non-static, you have to create an object. So that's important. So for non-static, access only through object. Fine. This is very important. So we won't be able to access your non-static members, like, okay, this variable I'm not able to access. So can I access this method? No. This is a static method. Sorry, non-static method, right? I cannot access directly from here. No, I can't do that. Again, you see, when I call XYZ, again it will give you saying object is required for non-static property or a method, right? So this is important. So that's the reason why. Now, if I want to call non-static variable or non-static method inside a static, then I have to create an object again. I'm in the same class, but I have to create an object of same class again, new, right? And I have to call obj.see amount. I can now access, or obj.xyz. Simple. Even if you're in the same class, doesn't matter. If you want to access non-static into static, you have to create an object and use. That's why they are called object members. Right? These are we do. So that's the reason why, if you remember, that's why I've created all other methods as a static methods, so that I can access directly. If I would have created a non-static like MET1, can I access MET1 here now? See, I can't. So what I have to do? I have to create an object of program, right? Program, let's say obj1 kind of new program, and then I'll say obj1 dot MET. See, this is my non-static one, and I can access only through object. Similarly, if I remove the static keyword from sum, add, and aggregations, I can't access it directly. I have to access through obj1 only. That is the difference when you make any variable or member a static or a variable or member non-static method or a. So that is something which is your static and non-static. That is something which is your class members and object members you have. Right? I hope it is clear, but yes, it will be clear and a bit confusing. So I recommend you guys to go back and see this video again, so that you understand the static and non-static behavior very clearly. This is very important to understand. Right. So that's about our static and non-static class members and object members you have. Right. Now, so let's go to the next step and let's understand, before we move on to the arrays, right? We have one more very important thing to understand called constructors. Right? Where we have just seen that, okay, when you create a new object, I said we'll actually understand this part, right? So let's understand this part now. Fine. So let's do one thing. Let's create a new class. Let me just remove the static from program. And also, okay, I am done with class 1. Let's create everything brand new. Let me create a new class called maybe I'll call it as trigger, so that I can call my static void main from here. Static void main of string array, open close bracket, right? And I'll say console.readLine, right? So this is my simple static method. Now I'll create one more class. Maybe I'll call it as, let's say, class 2 itself, right? Now let us see different behaviors how we can actually create. Now see, when I create, let's say class 2, let's say obj is equal to new class 2, right? Now there is a great meaning behind this. When I'm instantiating any class, right, normally this is called as a constructor call, right? Anyways, if you don't define any constructors in a class, see, as of now I'm not defining any constructor here. Can you see here? This is a plain simple class we have created. We haven't created anything. Right? If you don't create, what will happen internally? Right? Our compiler will create a default constructor for this. We'll understand what is default constructor now. Right? We'll create a default constructor for this, and that will be called to create an instance. That's how it is. If you don't create any one-off constructor, then internally our .NET framework will take care of creating the default constructor, and it will help us to instantiate. Or let's say we create a default. So what is default constructor? Basically before actually creating a constructor, let's understand what is constructor, right? And what qualifies any member of this class. Is it a member other than method and variable? Let's understand that. Now firstly, it is not other than method. It's a simple method we have, right? Constructor is again a normal method we do have, but constructor method will not have a written type, and constructor method name will always be same as your class name. So these two mainly qualifies a method to be constructor. Like your public, your method name is class 2, open close bracket, and that's it. You can see there is no written type. I'm not saying void or anything. And the method name class 2 is same as your class name class 2. Now this is your constructor we normally use. And constructor is basically used to initialize or handle any startup things you have while creating object, kind of database connections, or initializing some variables, whatever you want. So while creating object, whatever you want to be get ready, those things you can always create in your constructors. Fine. So here you can see I'm just creating an object, and this will automatically trigger this. So once you define your own constructor, then compiler will not create any more constructors for you. So let's say here I'm going to say console.writeLine of let's say class 2 default constructor. Right? We're just mentioning default. This is my secret. So now here you can see I'm not apart from creation of object, I'm not doing anything. So when I run this class trigger, right, it will open up console, and as soon as I create object, it will immediately trigger my constructor. And in constructor, what we are doing, we are actually printing saying, okay, whatever we are doing, we are actually triggering a constructor here. So let the console open. Okay, so here you can see as soon as we created a constructor, right, as soon as we object, it will trigger as class 2 default constructor, right? So this is a constructor we have where it gets triggered as soon as you. Now in this way we can have any number of constructors defined, right? So let's say I can define, let's say, public class 2 again, but the pattern will not change. Your return type will not be there, and the method name, the constructor name, will always be same as a class. So I can just say int, let's say, a something, right? Now we always call a constructor default constructor when there are no arguments to that constructor. That is very important, right? And yes, you can create multiple constructors of for your class with different signatures. Now this is one of the constructors I have, which is asking for one parameter of type integer. I can create more constructors like public class 2. Again, let's say I'll set string s, for example. You can say it's not all about the number of parameters we are actually saying. If the data type even is different, then the signature of this method is different. Similarly, let's say I'm going to take public class 2. So maybe I can go for more. Let's say int a comma int some b. So all these are different constructors which you can define, where you can see the signatures we are actually using here are different. Right, for class 2, mainly for default there is no parameter set defined, but here yes we are defining one argument again here, 2 arguments here, right? Now these are different type of constructors we can define. Now based on the constructors you have defined, get back here. So when you are actually creating an object of this class, right? See how it works. So I have class 2. See, I have 4 different ways to call a constructor. First way is without parameter. See, just press on down arrow, you can see. Second way is to create with one parameter, which is int a. Third with string. Fourth with, right? So when I say 23 comma, let's say 45, for example, it automatically doesn't know that okay, this is something which needs this constructor, right? Because based on the arguments that we are passing, right, now it automatically understands which constructor it is actually called. Now here, when you see these methods, the method name is same. Now initially we understood that we cannot create a method with the same name. If you remember our first classes, right, we can't create a method. Now anyways, constructor is again a method, right? It's not something different. The only thing is there are special features for this method that you don't have return type, and the method is same as this, but end of the day this is a method. And you can see this method which you are calling, right, we are able to write the same method with the same name again and again, but difference is signature. Now this type of pattern, right, of writing your method, right, with different signature sets in the same class is called as your something called method overloading, right? This method overloading is a method with the same name multiple times in the same class with different signature set. Okay, so this is called as a method, right? So when this is not just for constructors, it can be for anything. Let's say I'm going to say public void, right, met1 is my method. So without any arguments, for example, I can create same method. See, if I create same method with same signature, right, then it will give error. See, I created met1 and I created one more met1. Let me just build this project. Immediately it will give error saying in your class 2 you have already defined met1 with same parameters. This is not allowed. I can say some other argument set, and now when I build it, now there is no issue at all. We succeeded. Now this is called as your method overloading, overloaded with a different set of signature, different set of parameters kind of. Now this is your constructor, and you can call any constructor you want as per your. Now there is no, it's not a mandatory that you should always have a default. Maybe you can have only one constructor. Maybe I'll comment this. You have only one constructor with 2 arguments. Yes, you can do that. Now here what will happen while creating constructors? So previously we had 4, right? Now you can see we have only 1 way. Simple. That you have to always provide your numbers. That's it. This is the only way you can provide, because it all depends on the constructor type you are defining. That's your constructor, which is always used to create or initialize the startup parameters you have, and we can overload the constructors with different signature parameters. Now this is your constructor concept we have in C#. So any questions till now, guys? Fine, you do that. Perfect then.